Anybody need a headset? Everybody join us, please. Hello. Thank you for coming. You can sit right here. Please. You're going to need a headset. This is a good problem to have. We don't have enough headsets for all the people. Thank you. I'm sorry about that if you need one. Hi, everybody. I'm Margaret Ziegler with ICA. We welcome you to the home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas Pavilion. We have a fantastic panel set up here about water issues, which is the font of life, and we oftentimes forget to think about water. It's completely critical for agriculture and food security and human life. So we're going to focus this panel on no water, no food security. And the Americas as a region, as a hemisphere, has approximately 25 to 30% of all the fresh water in the world. And we really need to figure out how to sustain that water, conserve it, harvest it, and use it precisely and carefully. So a lot of what we're going to be hearing about today are strategies and policies to do that from a range of partners in the sector. Danielle Nierenberg is our all-star moderator with Food Tank. We're so happy to have her with us. It's a privilege to have her. She will be moderating, and we're going to get started here, I think, with a short keynote video provided to kind of set the stage for the issue of water and food security. If you can go ahead and run the keynote, and then we will begin the panel shortly thereafter. Thank you, everyone. Oh, and one other thing I should mention before we start. We're really happy to have Marilyn Hershey with us. Marilyn is a fantastic leader in the space of agriculture and food security, and she's also an ICA leader of rurality. She's one of our Goodwill ambassadors. So we're really proud to have her and the voice of farmers represented by Marilyn.
On behalf of Solutions from the Land and the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture, I'm glad to be part of this dialogue for climate action to talk about the linkage between no water and no food security. As we explore during this keynote, we'll begin to understand just how critical this linkage is and what we can do to begin to understand avenues that could be able to overcome some of these problems. To introduce myself, let me begin by saying that I'm a retired laboratory director and plant physiologist from the United States Department of Agriculture, the Agricultural Research Service. I directed the National Lab for Agriculture and the Environment in Ames, Iowa. I have a 45-year research career examining the linkages among carbon, water, and nitrogen as part of that soil-plant-atmosphere continuum. But my passion is really to help agriculture develop and implement solutions that will increase water use efficiency, sustainability, and profitability. So as we begin this overall process, let us begin to see that water is the most limiting resource to food production and food security. Throughout my career, I began to understand that if we don't have water, crop production is extremely limited. We see total crop failures in certain places. We see drastic reductions in production throughout all of the different crops that we grow throughout the world. To begin this overall aspect, really like to think about the framework in which we talk about a genetics by environment by management concept. And you think about this. Management is what we can begin to employ that will overcome some of our environmental changes that are going on to optimize our genetic resource and the potential of that genetic resource. So in our changing environment that we talk about, precipitation amounts, precipitation timing and frequency, precipitation intensity are just a few of the changing pieces of this puzzle in our changing environment. We also know that there's changing temperatures, there's extremes temperatures, there's extremes on both ends of that scale that we've got to worry about as well. But there are management options that we can use: water and soil management, agronomic management, and all of this puzzle that we begin to look at. We can look at genetics from the biodiversity of plants that we grow. It's not merely just changing a variety out there. We can change our whole planting system that we try to cultivate. And then within those plants, we can start thinking about genetic improvement as part of this puzzle. So as we begin this, we need to understand that we do have a changing environment. In terms of precipitation, we see that there's increasing variability among years. We see increasing changes in all of this that are occurring throughout the world. Yes, there are changes going on in terms of increasing our precipitation, but the variability that exists among years is becoming increasingly much more of a concern. There's also increasing variability within a growing season. And we look at this and you can say what was once predictable is no longer predictable. Onsets of monsoon seasons, or when those monsoon seasons quit, are changing all of the time. We see increasing frequencies of drought. We see increasing frequencies of precipitation events in terms of flooding, or even shifting that pattern within the season. And so all of these things give us an environment that's increasingly complex, but also an extremely important part that we've got to understand. How do we begin to handle this system? So we can look at it from a standpoint of management. You say, what practices could we implement that would improve water availability of that crop? Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is irrigation. If we have the water resource, we can irrigate that crop. And a lot of places are looking at this in terms of the efficiency of improving that crop production. But if we're in rain-fed agriculture, where we don't have the capacity to irrigate, we start looking at regenerative agricultural principles, reducing that tillage intensity so that we can continue to increase that soil viability, the soil health piece of that puzzle. Also, we can keep that crop or that soil covered with crop residue, increasing the infiltration rate because that energy is absorbed by the crop residue instead of the soil surface, reducing the soil water evaporation that's coming back out of that surface. We can increase the diversity of that crop with that crop growing all of the time to keep that cover out there. We can add livestock into that system in terms of supplying carbon-based nutrients that help that soil begin to improve its capacity of holding water as well. But we also have management options in terms of cultural practices. We do simple things like changing planting times so that that crop is avoiding some of the stress that is occurring during the season. We can also change crop maturities, going to a shorter season crop to avoid stress at the end of the season, changing nutrient management along with this, and then even changing crop cultivars as part of this system. If we think about it from this perspective, then we can begin to think about where do we bring the genetic component into this. Genetic component is more than just changing a variety. It could really be changing what we grow or the mix of plants that are out there, and looking at biodiversity as one critical component. Within each of those plants, we could look at genetic improvement. What can we do in terms of more drought-tolerant crops? What can we do to increase the photosynthetic efficiency of that crop to be able to grow, take that water available, and create a more stable cropping or more stable production over time? But the challenges exist in terms of being able to help producers understand the value of water management as part of their farming system. How do they begin to look at the system? And to do that, I believe that we really got to focus on how do we do on-farm demonstrations or trials of this G by E by M concept with producers as part of that research teaching team, so that we can take this information and begin to apply it and begin to do this. But there's a piece of this puzzle that has to be understood, and that's the fact that we need an urgent set of solutions to this problem. we need to really think about increasing the impact of water on food production around the world. How do we understand that? We also know that there's that changing precipitation pattern, so the water availability is changing. But we've also have got a continual reduction in land available, which means that we have the requirement to produce more food per unit of cultivated land. This continual increase in population is adding a stress to our system. All of these things need to be looked at as a system, and they need to be a call to action for all of us to begin to understand how this works. Thank you.
I want to thank Dr. Hatfield and his 40 plus years of public service to USDA. Give that a bigger round of applause, please. To stay in USDA that long over several administrations is an act of heroism that can't be understated. My name is Danny Nierenberg, and I am president and co-founder of Food Tank. Delighted to be partnering and collaborating with ICA, who are wonderful conveners of these events and these conversations. We have a wonderful panel planned, and I just want to talk a little bit about the theme, and this is how we're going to talk about how some of the ways farmers are managing water and what Dr. Hatfield referred to. So first we have Brad Doyle, who is a wheat, soy, and grass farmer and a board member of Solutions for the Land. Please give him a round of applause, everyone. Marilyn Hershey is a dairy farmer and the past chair of the Dairy Management Incorporated and also an ICA Goodwill Ambassador. Give her a round of applause, please. Kyle Bridgeworth is a farmer, an owner, and operating partner at Bridgeworth Farms, and he serves on the board of the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. Round of applause, please. And Bob Lowe is a producer and the president of the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef. Give him a round of applause, please. All right, so I want to start with a question for all of you, and I'm wondering if you can start by talking how changes in water availability because of the climate crisis have impacted your farm and your operations. So Brad, if I can start with you. So you should have a mic over there. You can't have mine.
Thank you. So what you didn't mention was I'm a rice farmer too. I'm from Arkansas in the Mid-South, and I've been growing rice in our county since 1906. So it was, I think, historically bottomland hardwoods that was cleared well over 100 years ago. So water was critical for the growing of rice. Today we grow about half of the U.S. crop in the state of Arkansas. Have another fellow Arkansas farmer here who is a rice farmer as well. So growing crops in my part of the world is all about water management. And we're lucky to have a father-in-law who in the mid-1980s, through the EQIP program, as it is known today through the USDA, built the first reservoir on our farm, 100 acres, took out of production to collect off-season rainwater to alleviate and to decrease the dependency on groundwater. And I want to say 40, 50 years ago, our water table was around 30 feet. Now we're at 130 feet. So we know we are depleting it. We irrigate our rice and soybeans, but not our wheat. We do grow that in the off-season, winter wheat season, where we do not need. We have adequate rainfall in the winter, and that is the opportunity for us to capture excess water, fill those reservoirs up, and use them during the next summer.
Brad,
now,
just let me interrupt you.
Yes.
So in terms of the climate crisis, what are you seeing day to day, month to month, year to year that's really impacted you?
Spring rains.
Yeah.
Delaying. So we get our highest yield potentials with early April plantings, and we haven't. That's been really, it's been a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
The rains come in and they kept us out nearly the whole month of May this year.
And so the planning is your whole planning for the year is just totally off kilter then.
Yeah, that's why we try to go bigger, faster, harder in that shorter window.
Yeah.
Our window of planning is getting smaller, it seems
right.
like.
Thank you for that. Marilyn, if I can turn to you and just again, day to day, month to month, year to year, how is the climate crisis affecting what happens on your farm?
Thank you for that question. It's interesting. This question is very timely because in the northeast part of the country where we are in the United States, our dairy farm is in Pennsylvania. We're seeing this right now. We just went through a 6 to 8 week drought, August, September, into October. I guess that's more than 6 to 8 weeks, but several weeks. It is the driest it's been since 1831.
Wow.
In our part of the country, and so the winter rye that we planted, the rye, the fields that had sufficient manure that was put on the fields in between the corn crop and the rye that was planted, those fields are doing okay.
Right.
The fields that did not get sufficient manure put on them before the rye was put on, the rye doesn't look good. So, the winter crop, it's not going to be there in the spring when we go to harvest. And so it is something we are definitely seeing. We had a dry, and it's very spotty. It's 10 miles down the road, it's different.
Yeah.
And they have a different, now this drought in the fall was widespread in our area, but this summer we had several weeks, and if we didn't get a rain, we got a very timely rain that saved the corn, but we were anticipating that we were not going to have a good crop. The corn, the ear of corn is shorter.
Yeah.
The quality of the stalk is not there, and so the feed quality you have is poor, and it just snowballs into poor production for the cows.
So huge impacts is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Kyle, can you talk about what you're seeing on that day-to-day level?
Sure. Day to day, it's actively managing and keeping up with rainfall is just a day to day high priority for us every day, and month to month, every portion of the growing season lives or dies based on rainfall. If it's planting season, you need it to come out of the ground. If you get too much during harvest season, it can ruin a crop.
Right.
And year to year, it's one of our largest capital investments per acre. That is a long-term investment. So not only the infrastructure to irrigate your crops, but also to manage it, to measure how much is going in, to test it. All of these are large capital investments that aren't only high priorities for us, but our corporate partners, our customers that we have, everybody, it's a group effort in managing water efficiently.
And it's a trickle effect. If things are not good, if you don't get that rain you need, then
it trickles down. You start off with high expectations on yield.
Sure.
The less rain you get throughout the season, the more quickly those yield expectations go down.
Thank you, Kyle. Bob, when we're talking about beef, what is the biggest impact of the climate crisis you're seeing on your herds?
Oh, yeah, Danielle, we live in a part of the world that we aren't used to an excess amount of water. We're a semi-arid northern Great Northern Plains environment where 19 inches of rain is a year, or moisture a year, is considered a lot. As far as the beef end of things, the cattle end of things goes, grazing management is just changing our grazing practices. Riparian area management has become huge for water storage. What we've noticed over the years is we have more extremes. We might get that 19 inches in a week and then nothing for the rest of the year. It's the timing has become more extreme, which means for us water storage is the biggest thing. Is when we have it, don't let it run away. We've got a lot of hills and mountains, and when it rains, it runs away if it can.
So water collection, storage, making sure it's there for later on.
Exactly.
Thank you. Marilyn, I want to go back to you and talk a little bit, and I've been talking about this really the whole time I've been here. Dairy farmers in the United States have such tremendous pressure placed on them. They are suffering in ways that, are very extreme. And I'm wondering if you can talk about how this, the effects of a long-standing drought, like you were talking about before, has on farmers who are already sort of suffering.
It is, and I also want to point out our country is so diverse. our dairy farm is 40 minutes north of the Chesapeake Bay, which is a very large watershed in the United States. And we don't typically irrigate. We don't have that problem. If you go to the lower Midwest into the West, North New Mexico, North Texas, Arizona, they have another water problem. So it's not the aquifer is depleting, and so farmers are suffering and deciding, what, I'm done. I'm not going to farm anymore, closing the gate because the water's not available, or they have to pay for it. They have to pay for the water usage, and those rates go up, and the margin is just not there. So it's a water quantity issue in most parts. Typically, we don't have that. Now, with climate change, we're seeing that in our area, but they're seeing some long-term effects, and also dairy processing. It's huge, and so we've become dairy recyclers. With water, and we have to figure out how do we recycle more and more and use that water that we can over and again.
Yeah, Brad, we've been hearing about the different kinds of innovations you all are using. Can you talk about some of the innovations in tech that you're using in rice farming that are helpful for sort of handling this flood drought cycle?
Yeah, so for the rice, we keep a shallow flood during the growing season after it's up. On the soybeans, corn, cotton, peanuts, we water down the row is our preferred method. And technology through GPS and land leveling. Now we've got software. If we know the output of the well, we know the length of run of a field. It tells us when we roll out our plastic poly pipe that it tells us how big a hole to pop through the length of the pipe, and then how many hours to actually run it to get 95% efficiency. So it's amazing.
Real precision.
Absolutely. And then alternating wetting and drying in the rice is a huge water conservation practice. But all of that ties back to technology through university investment, checkoff investment, USDA investment, and the sky's the limit on that.
Yeah, thanks for making that clear that investment needs to be here. This is the finance COP, and if that investment isn't there, farmers are going to suffer. Kyle, we've been hearing a lot about storage and recycling techniques for water. How do you manage that on your farm?
Sure. For us, our main source of water is the Tennessee River, so it naturally replenishes itself, and for us, it was the main reason why the second generation of our family farm moved to somewhere close to the river, was to be able to pump out of it. For us, it's a constant search throughout the year to try to find it. We're only 15% irrigated, so it's important for us to grow the ability to have access to water, but also to use it more efficiently. We use soil moisture probes in the ground so that as soon as the soil is saturated, all the irrigation shuts off, and as soon as that saturation starts to dissipate, they turn right back on. So it's a matter of balancing, keeping your productivity as high as possible, but also being as efficient as possible with the water you're using.
How challenging is that for you? I mean, I don't know how old you are, but you look like a young farmer to me. And to learn all of this sort of, all of you on this panel are learning things on the fly as the climate crisis worsens. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. The learning curve is steep, and it changes every year. That's probably the hardest part, is that it's not a matter of learning and adopting to new technologies. It's learning and adopting constantly at a rapid growth rate.
Right.
I mean, it's a ever evolving industry. Requires more partners. Requires a lot of trying new things out, trial and error, failure. It's become an ethos of our operation to try new things, try new techniques, have people come and help us.
Right.
So I think most farms just have to recognize this is a new part of our culture. We're going to be an experiment station along with being a farm.
Sure, there's a lot of experimentation that has to happen, and very urgently, and for it to work. Bob, how does the Global Roundtable for Sustainable Beef sort of help that innovation and experimentation? Or can it?
Yeah, we've got our goals, and I don't think we've got a real goal around water, but the innovation, that I guess it just goes with anything else, and a lot to what Kyle just said. It's a learning curve all the way along. And in our own particular operation, we've started diversifying where we operate.
Right.
And we've moved into areas in the province where it's traditionally has more water. Traditionally, you couldn't farm there. Now you can. So the whole system is moving, which isn't answering your question at all.
It's all right. It's all right. No, that's helpful information. I think all of you are having to diversify and do different things. And so I'm wondering, it's not only about conserving water, but protecting the waterways that we do have, like the Chesapeake, which is so valuable. I live in Baltimore, so it's very close to home. Can you talk about all of you talk about some of the changes that farmers can adopt to reduce the pollution, the nutrient runoff from their land?
I look at soil quality as, the soil is our lifeblood of our farm, right? And so the soil quality is so important. So we have been able to, back as early as my father, we were adopting new practices that helped us protect that soil. Protecting that soil is just so important for us as farmers. And there's waterways. There's also stream bank fencing that we put in, and actually, stream bank fencing has a twofold benefit because you add a biodiversity on the farm that is not normally there,
Right.
and we see wildlife and we see animals living in that, and you can have habitat for the monarchs, and so it's just a great area to be able to also have a benefit in that while you're protecting the streams. But that protection of the soil is just critical for us as farmers.
And enhancing the soil, because you talked about, using manure on your crops earlier. You want to use that manure as the resource it was meant to be.
Absolutely, and we can use that recycled water. So we'll capture water on the farm from the rainfall and then be able to use that and reuse that on the, it goes through the system. We can use it in flush systems where they're flushing the manure out, and then they can use that water back on the field. The nutrients that we use we have a methane digester, and the nutrients we can use from that water that comes out of the liquid that comes out of the digester is just critical for us.
Absolutely. Brad, are there nutrient runoff strategies, prevention that you can talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're so close to the poultry industry of Arkansas that we use a lot of chicken litter on our farms, and we get great response out of that, adding organic matter and the P&K value. So in a rice farm rotation, we are big micro managers of water on every field.
Sure.
Whereas we have areas of water drainage, every field has a dedicated drain to it. So yeah, it's critical. We've been heavy tillage over the years, but we're really flat, so we don't see the scouring and erosion that a lot of rolling hills, but we have a slow adoption to more no-till and more cover crops in our area, so I think that will increase as the incentives come to the farmer, because as of right now, it's an expense to buy cover crop and plant it, and actually the labor, in a timely manner during harvest is when that cover crop needs to be chasing the combine, and there's just really, it's not, affordable.
Right, and those incentives need to be there, and there's a way for the private sector to get involved as well. Kyle and Bob, how do you manage nutrient runoff or prevent it on your farms?
Sure, and nutrient runoff for us is, as I mentioned before, being next to the river, it's not only something for us to manage, but the water authorities and the public manage it too.
Right.
For us, buffers. So we may keep a tree line, we may keep a grassed area to help contain it. Then also leveling our field. So we'll curve the terrain somewhat of a field to make the water either run back in or help level that field off in some way, shape, or form. But that's all rain-fed. If it's irrigation, it's really just a matter of how consistently you turn it off and on for us.
Yeah. Bob, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
That's not a big problem in our operation. We do have a feed yard and we do a substantial amount of grain farming, but we don't get enough moisture as a rule to worry about it. By the time we spread the manure from the feedlot, it's going to turn into soil usually before it ever rains.
That's good news for grass farmers who are doing that kind of work. Thank you for that. This is for all of you. I'm wondering if you can talk about the need for accessing financing. Again, this is the finance COP. How do we access that finance and investment that is truly needed to make the work that you all do more efficient, more sustainable, more profitable for you all? So, Bob, if I can start with you.
Yeah, in our case, what it boils down to is business risk management programs from the government, crop insurance, livestock insurance, things that are going to insulate you from the absolute disasters, to keep you maybe not whole, but keep you alive. And governments have to come forward with workable insurance programs, which...
Is the Canadian government doing enough?
No, to put it absolutely mildly. They do a lot. Crop insurance is really good, to the point that it encourages the breakup of pasture land. Livestock insurance, it's there, but it almost doesn't exist. So they've created a real discrepancy between the two commodities, which has to change.
I'll be at the Canadian Pavilion later. I'll tell them. Kyle.
Access to capital is often a farm's largest liability, well before a bad crop or anything else, especially for smaller stakeholder farms that don't have the scale to make it 2 or 3 years of not being profitable. I'd love to see outside investment, not just from a private sector level, but whether it's the supply chain coming in and connecting more closely to the originators of that supply chain, more government funds focused on help move forth this climate beneficial and sustainable work. And also, I think there's other tools out there from a marketing standpoint that would certainly be beneficial for farms, but it's another technology you have to adopt, another management scheme that has to be incorporated into your farm.
Right.
So I think finance and agriculture it needs to be a growing theme, and it's evolving along with the agronomic techniques.
And I love that you included others along the supply chain helping do that.
Oh, sure, and that's becoming much more common too.
Yeah.
More farms are finding that end of the supply chain retail partner where they're collaborating from beginning to end,
Right.
and they're helping support some of these new goals.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Marilyn.
Yeah, in a couple years ago when U.S. Dairy set their sustainability goals by 2050, there's a reason that water quality and water quantity were in the top top focus areas. And the technology that we need, the investment that we need, is across it's broad. Okay, so we need investment. We need large investment that will help us to develop technologies. There's technology in the state of Washington happening right now there that the water from the manure pit goes through several filtration systems, and then the water is reused in the barn to water the cows. It ends up being water that is drinkable.
Sure.
And so, but that technology is extremely expensive. To get that technology to work on a farm takes a lot of investment.
Right.
But then you also have the investment of stream bank. I mentioned stream bank fencing or contouring buffers. Things like that can also, or even putting in a catch system on the farm that catches the rainwater.
Right.
So there's investment that can happen across the farm or across the board that would help small farmers, large farmers, and medium size.
Absolutely. Brad.
So this is a tough year for U.S. farmers. If you haven't been paying attention to the pricing, it's down quite a bit, and even last year as well. So we've got a lot of farms this year that are going to cut into their equity just to stay afloat.
Right.
And when you start looking at auction companies, full calendars, that's really quite scary. And for that next generation to be able to take over, it's almost non-existent. Kyle, you're talking about financing for the young farmer there needs to be help and programs available. But yeah, hang on. I mean, this is a tough one. We need to get through this. Low prices, high input costs is what's driving this low profit margin this year in the U.S.
Can you reiterate that hanging on aspect, though? I think that's real important for farmers.
Yeah, I mean, we need to be able to provide the grains, the seed oils, the fuel, feedstocks that the world needs. Yeah, we need a strong U.S. economy, both animal and row crop agriculture. Yeah, we just pray for them. Whatever, what do we need? Do we need support? Because there's a lot of them right now having some serious conversations with their bankers, whether they're going to finance them going into 25.
Yeah, thank you for that. So in the final few minutes we have left, I love ending these panels with a call to action because I think it gives us all some hope, right? Again, it's the second week. I'm tired, so I want to hear from all of you. What gives you hope? What do you want what do you want folks to take away from this COP, and what do you want them to have going into next year's COP? Brad.
The U.S. is all in. We have a great farmer invested, check off in place for many of our crops. That excites me the most because we have farmers leading those conversations, doing what's right, providing the necessary technology, technicians, information, education out there. So I look to U.S. as a leader in agriculture and all the fronts here. My colleagues from Canada, we have great partnerships with them as well. Industry is a big part of that. Genetics, we really didn't talk about genetics and the role they play, but very important for U.S.
Thank you. Marilyn.
Yeah, agriculture has solutions. There are issues, but agriculture has solutions, and I think if we have the proper investment, we can lead the way because farmers love to continue. Farmers want to pass on to the next generation. We have our daughter who just decided to come back to the farm, and we're thrilled. She's also going to make ice cream, which is wonderful.
Nice.
But we have solutions, and we need to be able to invest in those.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. Kyle.
My sentiments are very similar in that farming, it's an essential industry. Agriculture it's a universal industry, and a lot of times it's focused on for its impact on the environment, but it certainly has the ability to be the biggest solution for it. And I just hope everyone walks away knowing that globally it's a collaborative effort. Everyone's moving in that same positive direction. And if you look back 10 years ago, this wasn't that big of a conversation.
Right.
Now it's one of our biggest focuses throughout the year.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kyle. Bob, last word.
I'll say you look back 2 years ago and this conversation wouldn't have been taking place. And that's what excites me is just being at COP this is my third time. The emphasis on agriculture has gotten more and more and more, and more farmers here. People are starting to realize that they ate breakfast this morning and that came from a farm somewhere. So I think the industry's in good stead.
What a great point to end on. Please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. No, do we have Dina here? Hey, Dina. All right. Thank you, everyone. A round of applause again for those panelists. Come on, round of applause, everyone, for the panelists before. I now have the unique honor and pleasure of turning to our second keynote and introducing Dina Salel, the Regional Director of the Near East, North Africa, and Europe Division of the International Fund for International Development. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here with you today and to give some remarks in this insightful side event about the relation between water and food security. So I'm from the International Fund for Agriculture Development. For those of you who don't know, it is a UN specialized agency, but also an international financing institution that is uniquely mandated to work with small-scale producers and mostly to offer equitable inclusion for women, youth, and also indigenous persons who are most vulnerable to the threats of climate change. So this gives us really a unique position to be working in these domains. I think I'll be preaching to the converted. So water is the foundation of agriculture. and the interconnection between water availability and food production cannot be overstated. Water scarcity poses an immediate and a profound threat to food production, especially in rural communities where IFAD operates and where livelihoods are deeply tied to agriculture. As many of you know, small-scale producers in developing countries produce half of the world's food supply, and in Africa, it accounts for 70 to 80% of food production. At the same time, it is estimated that agriculture accounts for 72% of global fresh water withdrawals. And this, in developing countries from India to Ethiopia, the agricultural share of water withdrawal goes up to 90%. Based on the Global Water Security 2023 assessment report, most of the world's population lives in water-insecure countries today. This is just as numbers, 8% are critically water insecure and 72% are water insecure. So access to safely managed drinking water and sanitation are still a dream for more than half of the world's population. Water and food are inextricably interlinked. Food security is defined, of course, as food availability, access, utilization, and stability. But water scarcity, in turn, affects not just the quantities, but also the quality, the variety, and the seasonal availability of foods that can be produced and consumed. Thus, at the global level, water resource stresses, such as droughts in cereal-producing nations, can contribute to grain supply shortfalls, jeopardizing food security for hundreds of millions of people. In addition, and on top of all of this, global climate change threatens to exacerbate pressures on water resources and food production. As temperatures rise, crop water productivity will largely fall, all else being equal, necessitating larger water inputs to realize the same yields. So as we estimate, world food production will have to grow 50% by 2050 to meet the rising demands, requiring 30% more water availability than what we have today. IFAD's role and IFAD recognizing the importance of these interlinked components, water and food security, adds to it nutrition, sees the linkages here as very, very important, and it needs a collaborative space and collaborative partnerships with all stakeholders to address the water, food, and nutrition challenges in a comprehensive manner. IFAD recognizes the role of ecosystem services with respect to the natural water cycle. And we invest in watershed conservations and rehabilitation, which aims at the preservation of water purification, aquifers, but also looking at bulk water storage facilities and looking at how we protect the lakes and the natural resources to, of course, protect from land erosion, siltation of water bodies, floods, and also the effects of floods and storms. IFAD invests in rural areas, as I said. And in addition to looking at how we can protect the water resources, we also look at protecting livestock and natural resources, land. How can we protect, the environment in terms of how farmers can also preserve their natural habitat. So we are committed to support poor smallholder farmers to produce more crop per drop. And when we say that, it's not just fad, or it's not just words that we're using, but we actually put our money where our mouth is, as we say. IFAD applies different options and combinations of land management, agronomic practices, and improved water controls. Additionally, we look at reduction of water losses through better water conveyance and application also of how can we manage evaporative losses by improving infrastructure or shifting from inefficient irrigation systems to more water efficient techniques such as drip irrigation. To give you a concrete example, I'll just focus on 2 countries where we have worked so that you can also have more time for discussion. Niger is one of the world's, as we know, food deficit countries, with around 80% of the population living in rural areas. The Tahua, Maradi, and Zinda regions of Niger are the most productive and are home to more than 60% of Niger's population. But this productivity is hampered by a number of water-related problems, as droughts and desertification, erosion, and consequent watershed and river silting, as well as seeing declining groundwater levels. So through the Family Farming Development Program, which IFAD has co-financed with the GEF, we are helping the country to respond to these challenges by working, as I said, in partnership, but also at looking at facilitating sustainable access by local people to water resources in the watersheds through soil and water conservation, soil protection, restoration works on a large scale. The project's approach to water management is twofold. We work with the small family farms to gain a more reliable access to water. And secondly, we pay attention to the sustainability of the underlying natural resources at the level of the watershed. Between 2015 and 2023, the project seeks to mobilize about 205 million of blended finance to intervene in 22 watersheds covering 30,000 hectares and targeting 290,000 vulnerable family farms which are exposed to nutritional, pastoral, and environmental crisis and aim to strengthen their food security and their access to markets. In Djibouti, the problem of thirst is one of the major challenges faced by Djibouti's extremely precarious nomadic people, leading to extreme poverty, food insecurity, and chronic malnutrition. Through the recurrent droughts and climate change, which have exacerbated this situation, has put so much pressure on livestock herds and has led to soil degradation and loss in pasture land productivity. Poor nomadic livestock herders owning about 10 to 50 goats with low weight, high mortality, and high abortion rates are forced to search from time to time water and pastures, abandoning their lifestyles and migrating to cities, increasing the pressure on urban poor population. So through IFAD's funded soil and water management program, we have contributed to sustainably improving the living conditions of over 11,000 rural families on 13 transhumance routes in the Arta, Dikhil, and Tajura regions of Djibouti. We have done this through construction and rehabilitation of 32 water cisterns of about 100 cubic meters that harvest rainwater. The program has made sure agricultural water supply systems through mobilization and storage in reservoirs, 4 solar-powered agripastoral wells, and the increase of pasture productivity. But to further improve and diversify incomes, we have also worked to strengthen nutrition security. So we have helped support 1,000 small kitchen gardens that were set up to support 200 vulnerable families. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, let me reiterate that water is the lifeline of agriculture and sustainable water management and is essential for food security, rural livelihoods, and climate resilience. And the evidence tells us we need closer collaboration between the different water nutrition sectors. We need to optimize multiple water use strategies in rural areas. We need to produce more nutritious food with less water. We need to focus on building human capacities, and we need to improve the value chain from production, post-harvest, processing, the entire food system. So at the end, I'd like to also thank the organizers, and as we are in the ICA pavilion, I want to reinforce the role of Americas in achieving food security worldwide. I want to recognize the role of producers in the Americas that are also aiming to conserve water, soil, and produce food for themselves and for global trade. And lastly, to thank you for hosting us for your strong collaboration with IFAD. We signed our first agreement dating back to 1987. And I know that at the recent G20 meeting in Brazil, the Ministers of Agriculture, the IFAD President, and ICA Director General signed a memorandum of understanding whose main purpose is to guarantee food security in rural areas by promoting investments, digitalization of agriculture, and strengthening value chains. With that, thank you for your attention, and let us work together to advocate for food security and better preservation of our water systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gina. I love the points on collaboration, so needed, especially in times of crisis. Thank you again. We're now going to turn to a panel on policies and finance for water security. We have a wonderful group of experts. I'll invite them to the stage. Mark Isbell is a rice farmer and member of the Sustainability Board of USA Rice. Give him a round of applause as he joins. Natasha Santos is the head of sustainability and strategic engagement at Bayer. Give her a round of applause, please. And Rashad Husanov is the director of the Agricultural Economics Research Center at the Ministry of Agriculture here in Azerbaijan. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. Give him a round of applause, everyone. I'm excited for this panel. Thank you all for joining. So, Mark, if I can start with you. Thank you. Water is obviously such a critical resource for rice production, as we heard earlier from Brad, and it's a staple for half of the world's population. What are some of the biggest challenges from your perspective that rice producers are facing right now across the U.S.? Can you hear him?
Can you hear me?
You're
Yeah,
good,
it's a
yes.
little closer. So, yeah, as you mentioned, so I'm here representing USA Rice, but I'm actually a rice farmer like Brad as well there in Arkansas. And so what we've seen, as you mentioned, actually, it's rice is such a staple food for many around the world. In fact, it represents about 20% of the calories that are consumed in the world on any given day. So it's an incredibly important crop, but you're right, we do see substantial impact from climate change. We know that the data bears that out, but anecdotally, I've seen that impact our family farm back in Arkansas. I've seen the challenges of floods, I've seen the challenges of droughts, and that's highly problematic. But what I would say is it's not that we're just victims of this. We are, as farmers throughout the world and in the United States as rice farmers, we are taking action to make a difference. And if you look at the rice industry in the United States, we've reduced water use in my lifetime by 40%. We have reduced land use as a factor of production by 40%. We've reduced GHG emissions by 30+%. And we've set goals to do even more in the coming years. And we've done that because of the need to do that, but we've done that through innovation, through technology, and through partnerships with the USDA, who help finance some of that, through private partnerships. And in fact, the U.S. Rice Stewardship Program, through the Regional Conservation Partnership Program of the USDA, has put to work, and private enterprise, has put to work on the ground over $125 million in the last decade to make these types of interventions possible.
Sure. Thank you for sharing all that. So, Natasha, Mark has mentioned some of the innovation that is taking place. And I know from doing a lot of reading and talking to some of your colleagues that Bayer has been working on a particular innovation called direct seeded rice. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that, and then I have a follow-up about the costs.
Oh, for me or for the farmer?
For the farmer.
No, good follow-up. Yeah, so thank you for inviting us, and it was a pleasure to hear from the farmers on the previous panel as well. Yeah, so we have two approaches or two strategies, let's say, if you think about unlocking regenerative agriculture, particularly on the topic of our discussion in water. One is related to our technologies, our core technologies, breeding, genetics, that I'll comment in a second, and that's completely our strategy in that area, in that technology platform, is completely connected to climate adaptation. So we have today with the UAE 30 different fruit and vegetable varieties being tested on desert conditions, right? Thinking about many of the challenges that we have in terms of climate change. We have a big investment in the U.S. on short statue corn, which looks at climate adaptation as well on situation of extreme weather conditions. So they're shorter, the stalks are stronger. So those are the type of innovations that we have. But look, talking about DSR that you asked me about it, that's a different type of approach that we have. Of course, we are breeding rice, rice hybrids that can go into DSR because you need to have the technology to be able to unlock the system. But the direct seeded rice for us, and for me in particular, not only because it touches smallholder farmers in India, but because it looks at it from a system point of view, it represents for me another area or another type of strategy that we are trying to do with our farmers customer, which is how we can unlock systems in terms of me bringing my technology. If you think about seeds, if you think about crop protection, if you think about digital solutions, but more importantly, how can I be a catalyzer together with my farmer's partner, my farmer's customer? How can I be a catalyzer of other innovation, of other technologies that they can access to that is not on my portfolio? In this case, for example, some of the technologies in terms of new machinery for smallholder farmers in a system like direct seeded rice, or bringing finance as well to the table. It's not on my portfolio, but we are trying to bring partners into that system in DSR. So DSR, for who is not familiar, is we are transition, and we think we should invest on that for environmental and economic reasons. One is the DSR system shows from research papers and as well from the field trials that we can reduce water use by 40%, GHG emission by 45%, and with 70% of the farmers that we have been working on, you can reduce costs by 25%. So the return on investment makes sense for the farmer. So we are moving from flooded TPR to DSR, direct seeded rice, and
Natasha,
we believe by 2040 this will be maybe up to 75%
How much
of the
of a
farmers.
cultural shift is this for the farmers you're working with in India to do this instead
It's
of what
huge.
they were doing before?
It's gigantic. It's so huge because, well, they used to do this for decades, first of all. Second, why would they change, as it happens anywhere, particularly smallholder farmers, why would they change their practices if they need to see if it works? It's a huge transformation for them. And do they have all the technologies that they need to do so? So that's a lot of impact. And what is the cost of the return of investment on that?
Yeah, let's come back to those points in a minute. But I want to turn to Rashad now. And, I'm wondering, Natasha talked about being a catalyzer for innovation. How does the Azerbaijani government look at sort of being a catalyzer for helping improve water security in this country and the region?
Thank you for the question. First of all, thank you for inviting me for this panel.
Thank you for having us all here.
Yes, I mean, it's my pleasure to have all the brilliant minds in Baku. Before starting, let me just briefly give you the importance of the agriculture sector in Azerbaijan. So although this sector contributes only 5-6% of the national GDP, but it employs 36% of the population in the country. So it's really, really very important for the country. So if you compare the number of farmers, so we have more than 400,000 farmers in Azerbaijan, but then if you compare with Germany, they have 270,000. So we have really very more farmers than developed countries. So and if something happens in the water sector and so on, this directly affects the farmers' productivity, their wellness, their well-being, and so on and so on. This is a very important point to be mentioned. Another important point is the country is really very water scarce country. So only 30% of the water in the country are generated within the country, but 70% comes from the outside. So basically neighboring countries. So this is the control of the neighboring countries. We have tried to estimate, not estimated, we have to identified that over the last 2 decades, water resources in Azerbaijan has increased around 15%. So if you take a look at the rainfall statistics, you will see this the down level shifts in the country over the past 20 years. All of these indicates that we have to think about water because it's very important. I am pretty sure you have seen the Caspian Sea. So this is compared to the 1996. Now the level of water level of the Caspian Sea is decreased around 7 centimeters. So it's also a very important message for the country.
Sure.
And according to our estimates, within the 1 century, we will have 70% more droughts in the country. So this is really very challenging for the country. So what government has done so far in the field, actually last 5 years we are hearing a lot from the media, from the scientists, alarming in Azerbaijan that water is very important, we have to do something in this field, and so on and so on. So a couple of years ago, we have established Water Council in the Prime Minister office, led by the Deputy Prime Minister. This is institutional reforms have been done. So later we have established the agency, Water Resource Management Agency, kind of this overtook all the water system in the country. So basically implementing body. Water Council is the policy body, then this is another implementing body. Within different programs, so far the country has been allocated around 5 billion USD for the water system. So basically infrastructure projects.
Sure.
And in the last year and this year, the government has been also announced a national strategy for efficiency use of water resources. So this is signed by the president, and we have 3 phases. The first phase covers 2024, 2027, and then the next starts from the 2028, continues to 2030, and that is until 2040. So within this program, we hope that in the following years we will achieve better results in the water.
And hopefully help more farmers along the way.
Yes, I mean definitely this is directed to the farmers. Largest investment will be allocated for the infrastructural development. So this is directly for farmers.
Thank you so much for explaining all that. Mark and Natasha, I want to come back to you. So we've talked about the cost of changing production and not just the cost sort of economically, but culturally and what that takes. I'm wondering what kinds of policies you would both like to see that will encourage innovation and help farmers, conserve water because they absolutely need to in this time of crisis. So I'll start with you. We don't think we can hear you.
Oh, it was turned off. So back to what Natasha was saying earlier about direct seeding, and that for the Mid-South where I farm is a relatively well-adopted practice, right? But so it doesn't represent a cultural change for us. But alternate wetting and drying, which has an incredible impact on greenhouse gas emissions, was somewhat of the same type of cultural cost of making that adaptation. The direct seeder, by the way, in the Mid-South, the U.S., costs about the same as a median house price in the same state. So I mean, it's not without cost, but it creates efficiencies that we're able to realize as well. But the cultural cost of making those adaptations is real, and that requires collaborations between not just the down or upstream suppliers like Bayer, but the downstream buyers of the goods on the back end. So when I look at policy, I'm not looking to the government to come in and say we have to create a policy to make these changes. What I'm looking for is private enterprise to create the systems that we can help monetize those values that we're creating.
Sure.
So that now we have an entire supply chain that is bearing the cost of that and making the change real for both the consumer and the farmer.
Mark, can I stay with you for a minute? Can you talk about the role of farmers associations and unions in helping sort of change the mindset and help encourage the innovation?
Sure. So, I mean, trade associations like Brad represents for soybeans and like I represent for rice within the U.S. are incredibly important in being the voice of the farmer when it comes to shaping policy. Whether we like it or not, our governments have a major impact on agriculture. And that can be a bad impact if it's handled improperly or a very good impact. And what we see in the U.S. is through the climate smart partnerships have gone a long way to implementing change and good practices. And conservation programs like CSP, RCPP, and EQIP are all programs that have been implemented in D.C. that have real impact on the ground in adopting conservation. So these trade organizations, these farmer voices are very important in shaping those types of dynamics.
Farmers' voices need to be heard. There's just no question. Natasha, going back to some of the the costs of the innovations, what policies are going to help farmers make these transitions if they want to?
Yeah. So let's go back to India. The reason that a farmer would transition to direct seeded rice today in India, in general terms, is because of climate change. So anything that can improve the resilience and show yields, of course. And second is there's a lot of pressure on labor, seasonal labor. They don't have labor to do all the work on TPR as well. So those are economic pressures that they have today and climate pressures that they have today to consider changing under all the cultural challenges that we mentioned. However, there are two main challenges. One that I'll pick it up on Mark said, if they do so, there is significant contributions, there are significant outcomes in terms of reduction of emission. We're talking about 45% reduction of emission, including methane, which is huge. And then we all know how rice is one of the number one crop in terms of water consumption. We're talking about 40% of reduction of water consumption. So those are real attributes, real outcomes that the farmers can deliver, and how can they be incentivized in terms of how can they have additional revenues. And we are exploring carbon markets. We're exploring other areas or the downstream, how they can, through their sustainable agriculture programs, incentivize those farmers in terms of giving that revenue back of those significant, this is really significant outcomes if you think about India as a country. So those are the types of constructs. The other thing is how they manage their risk, and we need more innovation in insurance from private and public. Right. One of the things that we've been talking in India, in particular, just to showcase this case, is there are different structures, there are different constructs in current insurance schemes that need to be done. We are talking about insurance on germination, if they're going to change the hybrid, if they're going to change the approach, right, from flood. You need to have different types of insurance mechanisms, so you need to innovate on insurance. And as well, this is one case, but in the private sector as well, there needs to be new portfolio. Those are new practices, new data that is coming from the farm, and it needs to fit into old models, let's say. We need to change the models in terms of insurance. And that's, for me, is one of it's one of the most challenging conversations when you think about any transition in agriculture, if you're talking about big or small holder farmers. I think that's the key.
Yeah, that risk, that ability to experiment. I mean, someone like me who worries about these things from sort of, outside of the private sector, outside of what you all are doing, how does Bayer help farmers manage that risk? I mean, because it's a cultural risk, it's a financial risk, it's a risk that might affect their stomachs, right? If they don't get a good harvest that year from direct seeded rice, how do you help them manage that?
Yeah, what we are trying to do is either, in some cases where possible, we attribute our technology to a lower risk or to certain outcomes that maybe give the farmers a cheaper loan, or maybe design different types of insurance schemes. In India at the moment, we are, together with the farmers, we are sharing data of the technology of the hybrids of today and tomorrow, and we are partnering with insurance companies and reinsurers locally as well, to use that data to offer models, to offer products to farmers in this test and learn environment. So what are those champion networks, those champion farmers that we can use as front runners, let's say, to test certain mechanisms, and then, but this needs to be done in 3-6 years. It's not like one season. Right. You
have to fail quickly if you're going to fail.
Exactly.
Right?
So that's the collaboration, the partnership approach that we are doing.
Thank you for that. Rashad, I wonder if we can switch gears a little bit and talk about the NDCs. Are you optimistic that the next round will adequately address water management and its impact on food and ag?
Yes, sure. We are now working on the development of the low emission development strategy in the country. So most probably within this, by end of this year, we are hoping that we will be adopting this the new way of how we will reduce the CO2 emission in the following years. Agriculture in the country, in Azerbaijan, this contributes around 15% of the national overall CO2 emission for the CO2 footprint. But once we are talking about agriculture, it's not only the CO2 emission. This is also about the biodiversity, about the soil health, and many parts. I mean, this within this basically in the agriculture sector. So Azerbaijan has already submitted the second NDC within this year, so it has its plans to reduce the CO2 emission in the following years, in the 2000, as far as 2015, by the 40%. This is more ambitious goals. Now the government works on the topic in which parts of the national economy we are going to reduce what level of the CO2 emissions. So we are hardly working in these fields to have a clear action plan for the next basically 20 or 30 years. So hopefully this year we will finalizing this soon. So we are, as a Minister of Agriculture, we are working closely with the Minister of Ecology, Minister of Energy, Minister of Economy. So this is the, this kind of steering. We have a task force kind of.
Sure.
So we are working on this to estimate what we should do in the different sectors.
Rashad, do you feel like putting the NDCs together has sort of broken down silos within governments, because ministers of agriculture are talking to ministers of health and finance and others in ways that they might not have had to do before the NDCs were sort of, in place and required?
Actually, yes. I mean, this is not so easy task actually to work with the other ministries. So from time to time, when I'm meeting here with different colleagues, and they are asking what we can do with the Minister of Agriculture. From time to time, the people say us that okay, let's make something that also other ministries will take part in this common project or something like that. I'm saying that okay, this is good idea, but it's much more bureaucracy, because I have to knock the door of the Minister of Ecology asking that please do that, and Minister of Energy, please do that. It's very hard. Let's start with the Minister of Agriculture, then we can move later. So this is, I mean, it's not only in Azerbaijan, this problem. I'm pretty sure that in other countries, they have the same issue. Actually, I assume that that's why we had so far the NDCs. We were saying that, okay, we are reducing a certain amount of the CO2 emission by 2030 or 2050 and so on. But there were no kind of clear plan, so in which sector we are going to do what. So now we are working on that, so to identify what we will do in which sector. So this is very important. And from that point, as a Minister of Agriculture, we know that what we should do in the field of agriculture in order to contribute to the overall industry in the country.
Thank you for that. Natasha, I'm going to ask you the same question that I've asked all the other panelists in a slightly different way. There's always criticism at COP that the private sector has too much influence, right? But there's also the need for the private sector to play a huge role in preventing the impacts of the climate crisis. You're in a very difficult position with Bayer, and I'm just wondering from your perspective, what you want out of this COP. What is the call to action, and what do you want people to know about the private sector's role in all this and why it is needed, but that there's always going to be sort of difficulties and criticism?
Thank you for that question. This happens, it's my fifth, I don't know, I need to check with Gabi, COP. And we always have some lively encounters, which I like it actually. I love criticizers. We always learn more. But I think from our side, what we want in as a private sector, there are solutions out there. I'm investing billions of dollars on innovation. I want to say those solutions that we are investing that are now available, that will be available in 10 years, we believe it fits and will support much of the NDC's outcomes over there, which if you bring those solutions to a farmer, if you bring those solutions to the market, we believe this directly contributes with climate adaptation and mitigation goals. So if you want to regulate those innovations, if you want to regulate, please do regulate the private sector. There's no problem. Give us stability, give us predictability, give us a clear and stable rule of law. We will fit and do our strategy and our investment as the society wants. The important thing for me is we need to be talking on the same table. We can disagree. You can be, challenged, ask more information, transparency. All is okay. Actually, we want that, but we need to be on the same table. If we're talking silos, we will never find the solutions that are scalable and impactful enough for all the challenges that the world has. My family has, your family, the smallholder farmers, everybody. We want to work towards solutions. So I think that's why we are here, and I feel comfortable in friendly spaces or challenging spaces is okay.
I fully agree with you. If the private sector is not at the table, then none of what we're doing is for naught then, because we need the private sector to be involved. Mark, I wonder what your call to action for the COP29 negotiators is.
Don't overlook the farmers. Yeah, pretty straightforward. So just as this private and public conversation needs to take place, there needs to be ongoing dialogue with farmers and an understanding of how the decisions that are made here have implications for the good of the climate on the ground, but also can create challenges or opportunities for farmers. And so as we make those decisions, we need to figure out how we can create partnerships throughout the entire supply chain and make sure that we're looking to farmers as the solution instead of the problem, because they are.
They are the solution.
Not only are they the solution to addressing climate change, they are the reason that we have the food that is empowering us to have the energy to even be here talking about this, right?
Absolutely.
So don't overlook the farmers.
Don't overlook the farmers. Rashad, your call to action in your own country for the negotiators here at COP.
So tomorrow is going to be Agriculture Day in Azerbaijan Pavilion. First of all, I would like to invite all of you. So we will, officially announce the initiative Harmony. So the harmony in the field of climate change, adaptation plans, and so on. So farmers, my colleague said that don't overlook farmers. Actually, this harmony starts from the farmers. So we have to be from one hand side the farmers, and other hand side the policymakers, and other hand side the private sector. So basically triangle is very important. So harmony between all these triangles is very important. That's why we want to just announce this call for this harmony among all these parties, and we hope that this will help us to fight against climate change in the following years.
Thank you so much. Please give a round of applause to all of our panelists. I want to thank the ICA Pavilion for hosting us and all of the collaboration that's happening here. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it.
Just a quick announcement. Right after this, in about 25 minutes, is another panel. The Government of Canada, Government of Brazil, and Government of Australia will be here. And the topic is listening to farmers to make the best policies in agriculture. So if any of you want to stay, any farmers here want to stay and give them your input, they will be here around 12:30, I think. So anyway, thank you, Danny, again, for doing a great job, as always, with these sessions. Give Danielle a round of applause. And we look forward to having you stay. Come back anytime. We're having a lot of fun events. Tomorrow night, we will have a happy hour here at around 4 with a conversation with ministers from the Caribbean. So come for that conversation at 4 and stay for a happy hour tomorrow. Thank you.